She sat at a wrong table on blind date by mistake, unaware he's a mafia boss who'd change her life. Emma's hands trembled as she adjusted her black dress for the 10th time in the mirror of her small apartment. 3 years. 3 long years since David had walked out, leaving behind nothing but empty promises and a shattered heart. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be her fresh start. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection, applying one last coat of lip gloss. Her friend Sarah had been relentless about this blind date. "He's perfect for you, Em. A businessman, charming, successful. Just what you need to get back out there." The Italian restaurant, Bella Notte, glowed warmly against the evening darkness when Emma arrived. Golden light spilled from its windows onto the wet pavement, and the scent of garlic and fresh basil made her stomach flutter, though whether from hunger or nerves, she couldn't tell. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The maitre d' was busy with another couple, so Emma scanned the dining room herself. Sarah had said her date would be in a corner booth, dark hair, probably wearing a black suit. There he was. In the furthest corner booth sat a man who commanded attention without trying. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his black suit looked like it cost more than Emma's monthly rent. But it wasn't his expensive clothes that made her pause. It was the way he held himself. Like a king surveying his kingdom. Like danger wrapped in silk. He was nursing a glass of red wine, his dark eyes scanning the room with calculated precision. When those eyes briefly met hers, Emma felt a chill run down her spine. But Sarah's voice echoed in her head. "He's probably just nervous, too." Taking a deep breath, Emma walked over, her confidence wavering with each step. "Hi," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "I'm Emma. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was insane." The man's eyebrows lifted slightly, and for a moment, something unreadable flashed across his features. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his lips. Not the warm, welcoming smile she'd expected from a nervous first date, but something more dangerous, more intrigued. "Emma," he repeated, his voice deep and smooth like aged whiskey.
"How?"
"Unexpected." She laughed nervously, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "I know, right? Sarah probably told you I'm not great at this whole dating thing. I mean, it's been forever since I've done this. 3 years, actually. My ex really did a number on me, you know? Just packed up one day and left. Said he needed to find himself. Can you believe that? Who says that anymore?" The man's expression shifted, genuine amusement replacing the initial surprise. "People who don't know what they have." Emma blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. "That's actually really sweet. Sarah didn't mention you were charming." "Sarah," he repeated thoughtfully, taking another sip of his wine. "Tell me about Sarah." "Oh, she's my best friend from college. Total matchmaker. She's been trying to set me up for months. I kept saying no, but she wore me down. Said you two work together or something." Emma tilted her head. "You do remember Sarah Chin, right? Tiny, loud, works in marketing." Something flickered in the man's dark eyes, but he simply nodded. "Of course." The waiter appeared, and Emma ordered a glass of the house red. As she settled back into the booth, she found herself studying her date more closely. There was something almost hypnotic about the way he moved, controlled, deliberate, like every gesture had been carefully calculated. "I have to say," Emma continued, her nerves making her chatty, "this place is gorgeous. Very atmospheric. Do you come here often?" "You could say I'm a regular." His lips curved into what might have been a smirk. "The owner and I have an understanding." "That's nice. I love supporting local businesses. There's this little cafe near my apartment that makes the most amazing blueberry scones. I go there every Sunday morning with my book and just exist, you know? It's peaceful." She paused, realizing she was rambling. "Sorry, I'm talking too much. I always do that when I'm nervous." "Don't apologize," he said, and there was something almost gentle in his tone. "It's been a long time since someone spoke to me so freely." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, her wine arrived. She took a grateful sip, feeling the alcohol warm her chest and ease her nerves slightly. "So," she said, leaning forward slightly, "Sarah was pretty vague about what you do. She just said business." "What kind of business?" The man was quiet for a moment, swirling his wine in its glass. "Import and export," he said finally. "I deal with people who want things delivered discreetly." "Oh, like high-end goods? Art, maybe?" "That sounds fascinating." Emma's eyes lit up. "I work at the library downtown. Not nearly as exciting, but I love it. There's something magical about being surrounded by all those stories, all that knowledge." A librarian, he seemed to consider this. "I imagine you meet all kinds of people. You'd be surprised. We get everyone from professors to homeless folks just looking for somewhere warm to spend the day. I try to help them all. Sometimes people just need someone to see them, you know? To treat them like they matter." The man went very still, his wine glass frozen halfway to his lips. "Like they matter," he repeated softly. "Everyone matters," Emma said simply. "I mean, I know that sounds naive, but I really believe it. Even the scary-looking guys who come in sometimes, the ones with the tattoos and the attitude, most of them just want to be treated with basic human decency." A strange expression crossed the man's face. "And how do you treat the scary ones?" Emma shrugged. "The same as everyone else. With respect. With kindness. I figure we're all just trying to get through life the best we can, right?" For several long moments, he simply stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a rich, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "What?" Emma asked, but she was smiling too. His laugh was contagious. "Nothing," he said, shaking his head. "You're just not what I expected." "Good surprise or bad surprise?" "The best kind." Emma felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the wine. There was something magnetic about this man, something that drew her, and despite the warning bells that occasionally chimed in the back of her mind. The way other diners glanced at their table with a mixture of curiosity and what looked like fear. The way the waitstaff seemed to give their booth a wide berth. The way he seemed to notice everything while appearing completely relaxed. But then he'd smile at something she said, or ask her a question with genuine interest, and those warning bells would fade to whispers. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said, finishing her wine. "Anything." "Why did you agree to this? The blind date, I mean. You don't seem like the type who needs help meeting women." Again, that unreadable expression crossed his features. "Maybe I was tired of meeting the wrong kind of woman." "What's the wrong kind?" "The kind who wants something from me. Money, status, protection." He paused. "The kind who are afraid of me." Emma laughed. "Afraid of you? Why would anyone be afraid of you? You're a businessman, not a serial killer." The words hung in the air between them, and for just a moment, Emma could have sworn she saw something dark flicker across his face. But then he was smiling again, and she decided she'd imagined it. "No," he said quietly. "Not a serial killer." Before Emma could ask what he meant by that, a man in an expensive suit approached their table. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a scar running from his left ear to his jaw. Emma noticed he walked with a careful gait of someone expecting trouble. "Boss," the man said in a low voice, leaning down to whisper something in her date's ear. Emma's blood ran cold. "Boss." Her date's expression hardened instantly, all traces of warmth vanishing. He nodded curtly to the scarred man, then turned back to Emma. But he was different now, distant, calculating. The transformation was so complete it was like watching someone put on a mask. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice once again smooth and controlled. "Something's come up. Business." "Of course," Emma managed, though her mind was racing. "Boss." Why would someone call him boss? And why did that man look like he'd been in a fight with a meat grinder? He stood, reaching into his jacket. Emma tensed, an instinctive reaction that surprised her. But he only pulled out a sleek black wallet, placing several $100 bills on the table.
"For dinner," he said.
"And the wine." Emma stared at the money. It was more than she made in a week. "That's way too much. Consider it an investment in an unexpected evening." He started to walk away, then stopped and turned back. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and she saw something almost vulnerable in his eyes. "Emma," he said, "what you said about everyone mattering, about treating people with kindness. Yeah, don't ever change." And then he was gone, moving through the restaurant with a scarred man and two others who seemed to materialize from nowhere. Emma watched through the window as they climbed into a black sedan with tinted windows. She sat alone for several minutes, staring at the money on the table and trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "How's the date going? Is Kevin as sweet as I said?" Emma stared at the message. "Kevin?" Her hands shaking, she typed back. "What does Kevin look like?" "Blonde, about 5 feet 8 inches, probably wearing his lucky blue tie." "Why?" Emma's heart hammered against her ribs.
Blonde.
Her date had been dark-haired, at least 6 feet tall, and definitely not wearing a blue tie.
Ain't
"Everything okay?" Another text came through before Emma could respond, this one from an unknown number. "The man in the corner booth isn't your date. He left 20 minutes ago. Management." Emma's phone slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering onto the table. She looked around the restaurant with new eyes, noticing things she'd missed before. The way the other diners kept glancing at the corner booth. The deference in the waitstaff's manner. The fact that no one had approached them all evening except for that scary-looking man. And the money. God, the money. Who carried that much cash? "Miss." The waiter appeared at her elbow. "Is everything all right?" "The man I was with," Emma said slowly. "What's his name?" The waiter's face went carefully blank. "I'm afraid I can't." "Please," Emma's voice cracked. "I need to know who I was just talking to." The waiter glanced around nervously, then leaned down. "Marco Rossini," he whispered. "And if you're smart, you'll forget you ever met him." Emma's world tilted. Marco Rossini. Even she, sheltered librarian that she was, had heard that name whispered in news reports and crime documentaries. Marco Rossini, suspected head of the most powerful crime family on the East Coast. Marco Rossini, who was rumored to control everything from the docks to City Hall. Marco Rossini, who had just spent the last hour listening to her ramble about blueberry scones and treating people with kindness. Marco Rossini, who had looked at her like she was something precious and rare. Marco Rossini, who was absolutely, undoubtedly, the most dangerous man she could have possibly met. And the worst part? The absolutely terrifying, heart-stopping worst part. She wanted to see him again. Emma sat frozen at the table for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The restaurant continued buzzing around her, couples sharing intimate dinners, families celebrating birthdays, all blissfully unaware that she'd just been having wine with one of the city's most dangerous criminals. Her phone rang, jolting her from her shocked stupor. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Emma, how did it go? Did you and Kevin hit it off?" "Sarah?" Emma's voice came out as a croak. "Where exactly did you meet Kevin?" "At that networking event last month, remember? I told you about it. He works in accounting for some tech startup." "Why do you sound weird?" Emma closed her eyes, the full scope of the mistake becoming clear. The real Kevin, blonde, average height, probably sitting at some other restaurant wondering where his date was. I think I... The lights in the restaurant suddenly dimmed, and Emma heard the unmistakable sound of the front door slamming shut. Hard. The cheerful dinner conversation around her died to whispers, then to complete silence. "Emma? Emma, are you there?" She barely heard Sarah's voice through the phone. 3 men had entered the restaurant, and they clearly weren't there for the pasta special. They wore dark clothing and moved with predatory purpose, scanning the room like hunters. The maitre d' approached them with obvious reluctance. "Gentlemen, we're fully booked this evening." "We're not here to eat," the tallest one said, his voice carrying across the silent restaurant. "We're looking for Marco Rossini." Emma's blood turned to ice. They were here for Marco. The same Marco who had been sitting across from her just minutes ago, listening to her nervous chatter with what had seemed like genuine interest. The scarred man who had whispered to Marco earlier suddenly appeared from the kitchen, flanked by 2 others. Emma recognized the careful way they moved, hands ready to reach inside their jackets. "He's not here," the scarred man said calmly. The tall intruder smiled, but it was all teeth and no warmth. "Funny. His car is still outside." That's when Emma noticed it. Through the window, she could see the black sedan hadn't moved. Marco and his men were still here somewhere. "Must be running late," the scarred man replied, but his hand had definitely moved closer to his jacket. The tension in the restaurant was suffocating. Other diners were starting to notice something was wrong. A child began to cry at a nearby table, and her mother quickly shushed her. Emma's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped her phone. Sarah was still talking, but the words sounded like they were coming from underwater.
This was really happening.
This was actually happening. The tall man stepped deeper into the restaurant, his eyes sweeping every booth, every corner. When his gaze landed on Emma, still sitting at the corner table with $100 bills scattered in front of her, his expression changed. "Well, well," he said, starting toward her. "What do we have here?" Emma's fight-or-flight response kicked in, but her legs felt like jelly. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled. The man was getting closer, his companions spreading out to flank her. "You were sitting with Rossini, weren't you, sweetheart?" Before Emma could answer, before she could even think of what to say, the world exploded. The first gunshot shattered the front window, sending glass cascading across the marble floor like deadly rain. Screams erupted throughout the restaurant as diners dove under tables. The lights went out, plunging everything into chaos. Emma felt strong hands grab her shoulders, pulling her down just as another shot rang out. She found herself pressed against the leather seat of the booth, a familiar voice in her ear. "Stay down. Don't move." Marco. He'd come back. In the darkness, she could hear running footsteps, more gunshots, the crash of overturning tables. Someone was shouting orders, but she couldn't tell if it was Marco's men or the intruders. "This is insane," she whispered, but her words were lost in the chaos. Marco's body was pressed against hers, shielding her from the violence erupting around them. She could feel the rapid beat of his heart, could smell his cologne mixed with something else, adrenaline, maybe, or fear. "When I say run," he said quietly, his lips close to her ear, "you run straight to the kitchen. Don't look back, don't stop. My men will get you out." "I don't understand what's happening." "Emma," his voice was sharp now, commanding. "Do you trust me?" It was insane. Completely insane. She'd known this man for barely an hour, and most of that time she'd thought he was someone else entirely. She'd just learned he was a criminal, possibly a killer. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that she should not trust him. But looking into his dark eyes, even in the chaos and dim lighting, she found herself nodding. "Good. Now run." He pushed her toward the kitchen just as another volley of gunshots erupted. Emma ran, stumbling over broken glass and overturned chairs, her heels slipping on the marble floor. Behind her, she could hear Marco shouting orders, the sound of furniture being used as cover, the terrible symphony of violence. She burst through the kitchen doors to find two of Marco's men waiting for her, their faces grim but professional. "This way, miss," one said, guiding her toward a back exit she hadn't even noticed. "What about Marco?" she gasped. "The boss can take care of himself." They led her out into the alley behind the restaurant, where another black car was waiting, engine running. Emma looked back at the restaurant, its windows now spiderwebbed with bullet holes, and felt her legs give out completely. "I was just supposed to have dinner," she whispered as they helped her into the car. It was just supposed to be a simple blind date. The car pulled away from the curb with a screech of tires, leaving the chaos behind. But Emma could still hear the gunshots echoing in her mind, could still feel the weight of Marco's body protecting hers. Whatever she'd stumbled into, there was no going back now. The villa appeared through the darkness like something from a movie, all stone columns and wrought iron gates, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens that probably cost more than Emma's annual salary. Security lights illuminated the property as their car approached, and she counted at least 4 guards positioned around the perimeter. "Where are we?" Emma asked, her voice still shaky from the restaurant. Somewhere safe, replied the driver, the same scarred man who had whispered to Marco earlier. Boss's orders. The car pulled up to a circular driveway, and Emma was escorted through massive oak doors into a foyer that took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors and oil paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. Everything screamed money and power. "This way, miss," the scarred man said, leading her down a hallway lined with expensive artwork. "Mr. Orsini will be with you shortly." He showed her to what appeared to be a sitting room. All leather furniture and mahogany bookshelves, with a fireplace crackling softly in one corner. Under different circumstances, Emma might have found it cozy. Right now, it felt like a beautiful cage. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and she was alone. Emma paced the room, her mind racing. This morning, her biggest worry had been whether to wear the black dress or the blue one. Now she was sitting in a mobster's house, having survived what was basically a gang war over dinner. The door opened, and Marco entered, still wearing his expensive suit but now slightly rumpled. There was a small cut on his cheek that hadn't been there before, and his knuckles were scraped. "Are you hurt?" he asked immediately, crossing to her. "Am I hurt?" Emma's voice pitched higher. "You're asking if I'm hurt? You have blood on your face." Marco touched his cheek absently. "It's nothing. The situation is under control now." "Under control?" Emma stared at him. "People were shooting at us. At a restaurant. With families and children. Which is why you're here," Marco said calmly. "Until we know how far Victor's people are willing to go." "Victor?" "The man who interrupted our dinner. He leads a rival family.
They've been
testing boundaries lately." Emma sank onto the leather couch, the weight of everything finally hitting her. "This is insane. This whole night is completely insane. I was supposed to meet Kevin. Boring, safe Kevin from accounting, and instead I end up having dinner with," she gestured helplessly at him. "With me," Marco finished. "With a criminal." The words burst out of her. "You're a criminal, aren't you? All that stuff about import and export, you were lying." Marco was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Then he moved to a bar cart in the corner and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He offered one to Emma. "I don't drink whiskey," she said. "Tonight you do." She took the glass with trembling hands and sipped. It burned, but it also steadied her nerves slightly. "Yes," Marco said finally, settling into the chair across from her. "I'm what you would call a criminal." The simple honesty of it caught her off guard. She'd expected denials, explanations, justifications. Not this matter-of-fact admission. "So, what happens now?" Emma asked. "Are you going to kill me? Because I saw too much." Something flickered across Marco's face. Surprise, maybe even hurt. "Is that what you think of me?" "I don't know what to think of you. An hour ago, I thought you were a businessman who liked Italian wine. Now I find out you're apparently some kind of mafia boss," Marco supplied. "The term you're looking for is mafia boss." Emma drained her whiskey glass in one burning gulp.
right.
"That." Marco leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Emma, I need you to listen to me carefully. What happened tonight, you being there, the attack, it wasn't planned. Victor's men saw you with me, and now they think you're important to me. But I'm not," Emma said quickly. "I mean, we just met. By mistake. I was supposed to be with someone else entirely. I know that. You know that. But Victor doesn't know that." The implications hit her like a cold wave. "So, I'm in danger." "Yes." "Because of a mistake." "Yes." Emma stood abruptly, the whiskey making her bold. "Then I'll just go home. I'll explain to this Victor person that it was all a misunderstanding. I'll tell him I don't even know you." "Emma? No, this is crazy. I have a life, Marco. I have a job, an apartment, a cat, who probably thinks I'm dead by now. I can't just disappear into your criminal world because of some mix-up." She headed for the door, but Marco's voice stopped her. "The door is locked." Emma's hand froze on the handle. She turned it anyway. "Nothing." "Let me out," she said, her voice dangerously low. I can't do that.
Let me out.
Marco stood, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. Emma, please try to understand. She spun around, fury replacing fear. Understand what? That you're keeping me prisoner? That you've kidnapped me? I'm protecting you. By locking me up? Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. How is this protecting me? Before Marco could answer, a sharp crack echoed from somewhere outside. Then another. Emma recognized the sound now. Gunshots. Marco was across the room in an instant, pulling her away from the windows. Stay down, he ordered, just like at the restaurant. What's happening now? They found us. More shots rang out, closer this time. Marco spoke rapidly into a phone that had appeared in his hand, giving orders in a mixture of English and what sounded like Italian. How many? Emma heard him ask. The response made his face harden. Emma watched him in the dim light filtering through the heavy curtains, saw the transformation from the charming man who had listened to her nervous chatter to this, someone comfortable with violence, someone who commanded it. And yet, when the shooting started, his first instinct had been to protect her. Again. Marco, she said quietly. He looked at her, phone still pressed to his ear. If I try to leave now, I'll die, won't I? His expression was answer enough. Emma sank back onto the couch, the reality of her situation finally, fully settling in. She wasn't just in Marco's world now. She was trapped in it. And the most terrifying part was starting to realize that despite everything, the lies, the danger, the violence, she trusted him to keep her alive. Even if it meant becoming his prisoner to do it. 3 days. Emma had been at the villa for 3 days, and she was starting to understand the strange rhythm of Marco's double life. By morning, he was all business. Expensive suits, phone calls in multiple languages, meetings with men in equally expensive suits who treated him with a deference that bordered on fear. She'd watch from the window of what had become her room as black cars came and went, depositing serious-faced men who carried briefcases and spoke in hushed tones. City contracts, Marco had explained when she'd asked over breakfast on the second day. Construction permits. Import licenses. Legal stuff. Mostly. The way he said mostly made her stomach twist. But by evening, when the last of the day's visitors had left, he was different. The commanding presence softened into something more
Human.
He'd find her in the library, a room that had quickly become her refuge, and they'd talk. About books, about her job, about everything except the obvious questions hanging between them. Tonight was no different. Emma sat curled in a leather armchair, reading a first edition of Pride and Prejudice that probably cost more than her car, when Marco appeared in the doorway. He'd changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a gray sweater that made him look younger, less intimidating. "You've been quiet today," he said, settling into the chair across from her. Emma marked her place in the book. "I called in sick to work. 3rd day in a row. My boss is going to fire me. I can make a call." "No," her voice was sharp. "Don't you dare. That's my life, Marco. My normal, boring, safe life that I worked hard for." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry. About all of this." "Are you?" Emma studied his face. "Because sometimes I think you're not sorry I'm here." Marco's jaw tightened. "Emma?" "It's okay," she said quickly. "I mean, it's not okay, obviously. This whole situation is insane. But I get it. You're lonely." The words hung in the air between them. Marco's expression went carefully blank, but Emma had spent 3 days learning to read his micro-expressions. "You are," she continued. "I can see it. All those people who come here during the day, they're afraid of you. They respect you, they obey you, but they're terrified. And at night, when they're gone, you're just
Alone.
I chose this life," Marco said quietly.
Did you?
Or did it choose you? He stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the garden. "My father was in this business. His father before him. I was groomed for it from birth. That's not the same as choosing." "When I was 12, Marco said, still looking out at the darkness, My father took me to a meeting, told me to watch and learn. A man owed us money. A baker had a family. Good man who'd just had some bad luck. Emma set down her book, sensing this was important. The man begged, promised to pay, had photos of his kids, showed them to my father. Marco's voice was distant, remembering. My father smiled, patted the man on the shoulder, told him family was everything. Then he had him killed anyway. Emma's breath caught. Never show weakness, he told me afterward. The moment they think you're soft, you're dead. I was 12, Emma. 12 years old, and I learned that affection was a liability. That's horrible. Marco turned back to her. It kept me alive. It built this empire. It's the only reason I can protect you now. Is it? Emma stood, moving closer to him. Or is it the reason people are trying to kill us both? Before Marco could answer, the library door opened. The scarred man, Emma had learned his name was Tony, entered with another man she didn't recognize. This one was older, gray-haired, with cold eyes that reminded her uncomfortably of Marco's father from his story. Boss, Tony said. We need to talk. Marco's posture shifted instantly, becoming the commander again. 5 minutes. It's about the girl. Emma felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Speak freely, Marco said, his voice carrying a warning. The gray-haired man stepped forward. With respect, boss, this has gone on long enough. She's a liability. She's under my protection. She's making you weak. The man's voice was firm, unafraid. The whole organization sees it. You risked 6 men to pull her out of that restaurant. You brought her here, to your private home. People are talking. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling very small and very unwelcome. What people say is none of your concern, Vincent, Marco said, but Emma could hear the tension in his voice. It is when Victor's using it against us, Vincent shot back. Word on the street is that Marco Rossini has gone soft over some librarian. That all they need to do is threaten her to bring you to your knees. That's enough. Is it? Vincent's cold eyes flicked to Emma, then back to Marco. When's the last time you handled business personally? When's the last time you made an example of someone? Ever since she arrived. I said enough. Marco's voice carried such menace that even Vincent stepped back. But Emma could see something in the older man's eyes, disappointment, maybe even pity. You're not your father, Vincent said quietly. But maybe that's not such a good thing. After Vincent and Tony left, the library fell into heavy silence. Marco stood frozen by the window, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He's right, isn't he? Emma said finally. Emma, I'm making you weak. My being here is putting you in danger. Marco spun around, his eyes blazing. You think I care about that? You should care about that. This is your life, your world. I'm just some random woman who sat at the wrong table. You're not random. The words came out fierce, desperate. You're the first person in 20 years who's looked at me and seen something other than a monster. Emma's heart clenched. Marco, you treat me like I'm human, Emma. Like I matter for reasons that have nothing to do with fear or money or power. He ran his hands through his hair. Do you have any idea what that's like for someone like me? The vulnerability in his voice broke something open inside her chest. This dangerous, powerful man who commanded an empire, he was as trapped as she was, just in a different kind of prison. But Vincent's right about one thing, Emma said softly. This can't last forever. Eventually, you'll have to choose. Marco moved closer to her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. What if I already have? Emma never got to respond to Marco's question. At dawn the next morning, she was jolted awake by shouting in the hallway outside her room. She grabbed the silk robe Marco had provided and crept to her door, pressing her ear against the wood. Every newspaper in the city. Tony's voice was sharp with panic. Look at this. Emma heard the rustle of paper, then Marco's voice, deadly quiet. Where did they get this? Has to be Victor. He's been watching the villa. Emma's blood chilled.
They were talking about her.
She was sure of it. The voices moved away, but she caught fragments. Public now. Whole organization compromised. Should have listened to Vincent. An hour later, Marco appeared at her door with a newspaper in his hands and murder in his eyes. We need to talk. Emma's stomach dropped as she saw the front page. There, in full color, was a photograph of her and Marco at the restaurant 3 nights ago. She was laughing at something he'd said, leaning forward across the table, looking for all the world like a woman completely enchanted by her dinner companion. The headline read, Marco Rossini's Mystery Woman. Crime boss goes soft for local librarian? Oh God, Emma whispered. How did they? Victor has people everywhere, Marco said grimly. Reporters, photographers, probably half the staff at that restaurant. Emma sank onto the bed, the newspaper trembling in her hands. The article was worse than the headline. It had her full name, her address, her workplace. It described her as Marco Rossini's new girlfriend and speculated about how the city's most feared crime boss appears to have found his weakness. I'm so sorry, she whispered. This isn't your fault. But Emma could see the tension in every line of his body. She'd brought this on him, this exposure, this vulnerability. Vincent had been right. She was making him weak. What happens now? Marco was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the gardens where his security team was doubled, maybe tripled since yesterday. Now Victor knows exactly how to hurt me. Emma spent the day trying to read, trying to distract herself, but every sound made her jump. Marco was gone most of the day, dealing with what she assumed was damage control. When he returned that evening, he looked exhausted. We're moving you tomorrow, he said without preamble. Somewhere more secure. For how long? I don't know. The defeat in his voice scared her more than any of Victor's threats. This was a man who controlled an empire, who commanded absolute loyalty, who had never backed down from a fight. And now he looked broken. Marco. I should have let you leave that first night, he said. Should have put you in a car and sent you home with instructions to forget you ever met me. But you didn't. Because I'm selfish, his laugh was bitter.
Vincent was right.
I am weak. Emma stood, crossing to where he sat slumped in the chair by the window. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his face, turning his head to look at her. You're not weak, she said firmly. You're human. Before either of them could say more, Tony burst through the door, without knocking. Boss, we have a problem. Marco was on his feet instantly. What is it? They took her. Emma felt the world tilt. Took who? Tony's face was grim. Your friend.
Sarah.
Victor's people grabbed her an hour ago. The newspaper fell from Emma's numb fingers.
No. No, no, no.
Sarah has nothing to do with this. They left this. Tony handed Marco a single sheet of paper. Marco read it, his face going stone cold. Then he crumpled it in his fist. What does it say? Emma demanded. It's an address. A warehouse on the docks. Marco's voice was flat, emotionless. Victor wants to meet. Alone. It's a trap, Tony said immediately. Of course it's a trap. Emma grabbed Marco's arm. You can't go. He'll kill you. If I don't go, he'll kill Sarah. And probably you next. The cold calculation in his voice sent chills down her spine. This was the Marco his enemies knew, the one who weighed lives like chess pieces. There has to be another way, Emma said desperately. Marco looked at her, and for a moment, his mask slipped. She saw the man who had listened to her ramble about blueberry scones, who had protected her when the shooting started, who had chosen her over his empire's approval.
There is no other way, Emma.
This is what my world looks like. Over the next 2 hours, Emma watched Marco transform. The gentle man who had shared his loneliness with her disappeared, replaced by someone cold and efficient. He met with his lieutenants, planned contingencies, distributed weapons. 20 men, Vincent was saying. Full tactical gear. We can surround the warehouse. No, Marco's voice brooked no argument. He said alone. The moment Victor sees backup, Sarah dies. Then you die, Vincent shot back. Is one civilian worth your life? Worth this entire organization? Marco's eyes flicked to Emma, who was listening from the doorway. Yes. Vincent followed his gaze, and Emma saw understanding dawn in his cold eyes. This isn't just about the friend, is it? You're doing this for her. Marco didn't deny it. You're going to destroy everything your father built, Vincent said quietly. Everything we've all sacrificed for. Then so be it. Emma's heart clenched. He was going to die because of her. Because she'd sat at the wrong table, because she'd made him care about her, because she'd brought her normal world crashing into his dangerous one. As Marco prepared to leave, checking his weapon, giving final instructions to his men, Emma made a decision that surprised even her. Take me with you. Marco spun around. Absolutely not. Victor wants to hurt me to get to you, right? So, let's give him what he wants. Let's go together. Emma, you don't understand what you're suggesting. I understand perfectly, she lifted her chin, channeling a courage she didn't know she possessed. I understand that my best friend is going to die because of me. I understand that you're going to get yourself killed trying to save her. And I understand that I'd rather die fighting than live knowing I let both of you sacrifice yourselves for my mistakes. Marco stared at her for a long moment. Then, despite everything, he smiled. You realize you're completely insane? I learned from the best. As they prepared to walk into Victor's trap together, Emma realized something that should have terrified her, but somehow didn't. She would rather die at Marco's side than live safely without him. The librarian who had sat at the wrong table was gone. In her place was a woman ready to fight for the dangerous man who had become her whole world. The warehouse stank of salt water and rust, its broken windows letting in slivers of moonlight that cut through the darkness like knife blades. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as she and Marco walked deeper into the cavernous space, their footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Victor. Marco's voice rang out, commanding even here. I'm here. Let the women go. Laughter echoed from somewhere in the shadows, cold and mocking. Then Victor stepped into a pool of light, dragging Sarah behind him. Emma's friend looked terrified but unharmed, tape across her mouth, her hands bound. Marco Rossini, Victor said, his accent thick with satisfaction, finally graces me with his presence. Emma counted at least 8 men positioned around the warehouse, all armed. This had been a suicide mission from the start. Let them go, Marco repeated. Your fight is with me, is it? Victor's smile was all teeth.
See, I've been thinking about that.
My fight was with the Marco Rossini who built an empire on fear and respect. But that Marco died the moment he let a librarian make him soft. Victor shoved Sarah forward, and she stumbled to her knees. Emma started toward her friend, but Marco's hand caught her wrist. Easy, he murmured. How touching, Victor continued. The great Marco Rossini, reduced to playing bodyguard for civilians. Do you know what my people are calling you now? The love-struck dawn has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Enough games, Marco said. What do you want? What I've always wanted. Your territory. Your connections. Your empire. Victor pulled out a gun, pressing it to Sarah's temple. But first, I want to see you choose. Your power. Or your women. Emma felt Marco tense beside her. This was it, the moment Vincent had warned about. The moment when affection became a fatal weakness. Here's the deal, Victor continued. Walk away. Leave the city. Leave the business. Leave everything you've built. Do that, and they live. And if I don't... Victor's smile widened. Then I kill the friend first, while you watch. Then the librarian. Then you. In that order. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant sound of water lapping against the docks. Emma could practically see Marco calculating odds, weighing options, falling back on 20 years of survival instincts. But she also saw something else in his eyes. Something that looked like peace. Counteroffer, Marco said quietly. Victor raised an eyebrow. Let them go, and I'll give you what you really want. Which is? Marco's hand moved slowly toward his jacket. The chance to kill Marco Rossini in a fair fight. Emma's blood turned to ice. Marco, no. One-on-one, Marco continued, ignoring her. No weapons.
Just you and me.
Winner takes everything. Victor laughed. You think you can take me in a fight, old man? Marco was at least 10 years older than Victor, and the younger man was built like a boxer. It should have been suicide. But Emma had seen Marco move, had felt the controlled power in his body when he'd shielded her from gunfire. "There's only one way to find out," Marco said. Victor considered this, then nodded to his men. They formed a rough circle, creating an impromptu fighting ring. Sarah was pushed to the edge, still bound but momentarily forgotten. Emma grabbed Marco's arm as he started to remove his jacket. "This is insane. He could kill you." Marco turned to her, and in his eyes she saw everything he couldn't say. This was the only way. The only chance all three of them had to walk out alive. "If something happens to me," he said quietly, "Tony will get you out of the city. You and Sarah. New identities, new lives somewhere safe." "I don't want a new life," Emma whispered. "I want this one. With you." Marco's hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. "You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, Emma. You gave me back my humanity." Before she could respond, he kissed her. Not gentle, not hesitant, but fierce and desperate, and full of everything they'd never had time to say. Then he stepped into the circle. The fight was brutal. Victor was younger, stronger, faster. But Marco fought like a man with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. They crashed into shipping containers, rolled across concrete, trading devastating blows that echoed through the warehouse. Emma watched in horror as Marco took hit after hit, his face bloodying, his movements slowing. Victor was winning, and they all knew it. "Stay down," Victor panted as Marco struggled to his feet once more. "It's over, old man." But Marco wiped blood from his mouth and smiled. "Not yet." That's when Emma heard it, the distant sound of sirens. Getting closer. Victor heard it too. His head snapped up, confusion replacing confidence. "What did you?" Marco's punch caught him square in the jaw, dropping him like a stone. "Insurance," Marco gasped, standing over Victor's unconscious form. "Called in an anonymous tip about gunfire at the docks." The warehouse exploded into chaos as Victor's men scattered, not willing to face police attention. In the confusion, Marco freed Sarah while Emma helped her friend to her feet. By the time the sirens were screaming outside, they were already gone. 3 days later, Emma sat in a different restaurant, across from Kevin, the real Kevin. Blonde, pleasant, exactly as Sarah had described. He was telling her about his job in accounting, about his hobbies, about his 5-year plan. He was perfectly nice, perfectly safe, perfectly boring. "So, what do you think?" Kevin asked as dinner wound down. "Maybe we could do this again sometime?" Emma smiled politely. "That's very sweet, but I don't think we're compatible." Outside the restaurant, a sleek black car waited at the curb. Through the tinted windows, she could just make out a familiar silhouette. Emma stood at the crossroads of her life, key to her ordinary apartment heavy in her hand. She could go home, feed her cat, return her safe job at the library, pretend the last week had been a dream. Or she could walk to that car, where a dangerous man with kind eyes waited to offer her a life she'd never imagined wanting. The choice, finally, was hers alone. Emma dropped her apartment key into her purse and walked toward the car. Some tables were worth sitting at, even if you'd found them by mistake. Especially if you'd found them by mistake. The door opened, Marco's scarred hand extending toward her, and Emma stepped into her new life without looking back.